and welcome to The Download, where we bring you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today's Friday, August 18th, 2023. I'm Brady Light here with my two co-hosts, Simon Rafe and Diamond Dave Gordon, a.k.a. Flash. So, August 19th, that's tomorrow, is the feast St. John Eudes. He was a Frenchman, born in Normandy in 1601. He studied under the Jesuits back when they were Catholic, then decided to join the Oratorians, also called the Congregation of the Oratory of St. Philip Neri. He was ordained a priest forever on December 20th, 1625. Well, soon after that, he suffered from a disease that left him bedridden for some time. He continued his theological studies even after ordination and also volunteered to care for victims of the plague during multiple major outbreaks. Then in 1633, he began preaching parish missions and essentially lived as a missionary priest. He also founded several seminaries because he saw that priestly formation was needed, and along with significant reform. In 1641, he founded a congregation of religious life called the Order of Our Lady of Charity of the Refuge. Now, this order helped girls and women facing severe poverty. That work included helping former prostitutes leave their past behind and live a life of prayer and penance. Even nowadays, the order still does a lot of work with women and children in need. Well, the saint moved on from the Congregation of the Oratory to establish a new order, the Congregation of Jesus and Mary. It's what's called a Society of Apostolic Life, and it was dedicated to seminary, education, and running parish missions. Well, at the age of 79, Father Eudes finally passed into eternity on August 19th of 1680 and was canonized in 1925. Now, that is a lot of work going on there that must have been fired by a lot of prayer. And because I always look at the output, designing a solar array that you can go ahead and, a solar generator. That inverter there at the end is just where you plug in all the appliances. But there has to be batteries that have all that stored up grace, if you will. And how do you do that? Is this solar array out there catching all this, their sunrise, that's in the prayer. So stirring that up into his heart and then pouring that all of these missionary, missions are very exhaustive. All the confessions you're hearing, all the people, and they're, some people haven't been in confession in 30, 40 years, they'll say at these things. So founding orders, working with homeless and the poor and impoverished, establishing seminaries, my goodness, for the formation of young priests, and seeing that as very essential. Just a powerhouse, a real powerhouse. And even, back then, seeing the necessary reform. I think, Dave, you have some salient points there to bring up about Eudes regarding his the need, actually, for good priests and what happens when we don't always merit those.
Funny you should ask. And by the way, did you say Eudes? Let's harken back to my cousin Vinny here.
Oh no.
Oh gosh, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Eudes.
All right. Eudes.
Well, yeah. Here's a good quote from St. John Eudes on particularly pertaining to that point, Bradley. Quote, "The most evident mark of God's anger and the most terrible castigation he can inflict upon the world are manifested when he permits his people to fall into the hands of clerics who are priests more in name than in deed, priests who practice the cruelty of ravening wolves rather than the charity and affection of devoted shepherds. Instead of nourishing those committed to their care, they rend and devour them brutally. Instead of leading their people to God, they drag Christian souls into hell in their train. Instead of being the salt of the earth and the light of the world, they are its innocuous poison and its murky darkness. St. Gregory the Great says that priests and pastors will stand condemned before God as the murderers of any souls lost through neglect or silence." End quote. Powerful stuff there, and this actually comports, with other aspects of the church's understanding of wicked rulers. So if you look at Father Spirago's treatment of the Catechism of Trent, he particularly says that wicked rulers in general are punishment for the sins of mankind, and that we are to pray to be delivered from them, and we're to repent of our sins in order to be delivered from them. And then God, when it pleases him to do so, will relieve us of the burdens put on us by wicked rulers. Now, that's not to say, though, while we accept our punishment, we do want to pray for the reform of evildoers, particularly wicked prelates. And we're also to help evangelize them. And the Second Vatican Council makes this very clear in things like Lumen Gentium and Gaudium et Spes, that the laity has this important role that had been underplayed for most of church history in evangelization. So although, yes, the quote holds true here, you know, for our sins, we do find ourselves today even in a place where we have bad shepherds at times, but we are to pray for them, evangelize them, reform our lives, and hope to be delivered.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because obviously there are a number of different ways to read this quote. You know, you can obviously look at it here, and it's this terrible judgment being rendered upon bad clerics, you know, that they will be, you know, they will stand condemned before God as murderers of souls and all this sort of stuff. But really, I think the most important part is the beginning. The most evident mark of God's anger and the most terrible castigation he can inflict upon the world are manifested when he permits his people to fall into the hands of clerics who are priests, etc., etc., etc. This is a punishment on the people, on the laity, on the church, on the people of God, the punishment on the world for its impiety, for our failure to do this. It's not just a question of us being able to say, oh, well, yes, all these clerics, these are terrible people and they will stand condemned before God. Absolutely, yes. But we deserve this. This is the castigation at this point. It is our fault and our problem. And the way of addressing it is not just to go out and say, hey, look at all these bad priests. You bad priests, you need to be better. It should be us laity. We need to be better. Or in a more practical way, me personally, I need to be better. I need to be better. I need to be a holier, a better person so that I am not needed to be castigated by God. You brought up My Cousin Vinny. Classic movie, I believe, from the 1990s. Another classic movie from the late 1990s is the movie The Matrix, which you may or may not remember. In The Matrix, Lawrence Fishburne, he travels around in some sort of amazing hovercraft machine.
Nebuchadnezzar.
The Nebuchadnezzar, named after Nebuchadnezzar, who, of course, very famously in the Bible, is the scourge of God. He is sent by God to punish the Israelites for their infidelity. And that's, of course, why the vehicle is called Nebuchadnezzar, because it's this idea of, that this is sent, the punishment of the machines are for mankind's hubris and so forth. But the issue is that we must recognize these characters, such as Nebuchadnezzar, such as, maybe historical characters from later in history, such as Attila the Hun, even, characters today, such as Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, these kind of characters, Stalin. We must recognize these people as a punishment inflicted on us. And equally as well, let's look at this. Bad prelates, Supich and Dolan and Tobin and all of these people. These
McElroy.
There you are, McElroy. You know what? We could sit here and just keep listing people. But these are a punishment inflicted on us for our impiety. And our goal, of course, should be really to engage more in personal holiness to grow to this point. But I think you've got some comments about the Sacred Heart, which is a great way to...
I didn't really want to bring that up yet, because this still unpacking this notion here. When it says God sends, it's more like nature taking its course. Let's roll back 1968, Humanae Vitae, and the number of Catholics who were using contraception at that time, and the number of bishops telling their priests, hey, stiff-arming them. You can find this on Canadian Collapse and other shows that we've done, where the young priests coming out and they're going to say, well, you're going to tell people in the confessional that it's okay, they're going to follow their conscience. And all we heard through the 70s, follow your conscience. Never form your conscience, and if you do form your conscience, it's never formed along with the lines of the Catholic faith. So this idea that God punishes, there's the phrase, he heals even as he wounds. Medicinal punishment. He allows nature to take its course. In his wisdom, as St. Paul says, all things work for the good for those who love God, for those who will actually benefit from it. And we know that God brings good out of evil. So he allows that nature, human nature, and just nature itself to take its course. And what is that? Bad families engender bad kids who grow up to be a King Henry VIII, who doesn't internalize the faith. It's all rational and outside of him. Or these Bidens and Carries, they come from bad Catholic homes. And then you have also the priests who, the McElroys, the Supaches, and all these people who somehow either didn't have it or they lost it along the way. And what happens when these bad families are sending out civil leaders and religious leaders out into the world that are bad leaders because it's a bad root. The fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. So you're going to have these people, and they're going to come back and start being a punishment on the world. How that's going to all work itself out, and we're all going to get the idea that, hey, maybe we should be holy. Maybe there's something to this God thing and prayer and grace after all, because this really sucks right now. This is a world that we can't hardly live in the church and outside the church, in society, civil society and ecclesial society. And we need to correct it. How are we going to correct that? Ding! Maybe we should get down on our knees and pray to God and start being holy as a family. And, that's where our solution works out to be.
Leo XIII talks about this in Sapientiae Christianae and in Immortality Dei. The people you are forming as youths in the home are going to go out. The whole episode is dedicated to my cousin Vinny. I apologize, David Newsman. But the people that we're forming in our homes are going to go out into the world and carry their values out. So in this sense, the domestic church has to be absolutely put on a platform, and we have to say this needs resources. We have to invest in this. Families produce leaders, they produce priests, and what happens to the family, as John Paul II says, is going to affect the entire world in which we live.
And we see that in spades today. We totally see that.
Absolutely. Especially certain communities, Black Americans, the family is in disarray, and that has lent itself to an utterly dysfunctional and oftentimes criminal culture where you see the most incarcerated people in America.
Yeah, the whites too, the Bidens and the Carries and all them, they're not people of color by any means.
No.
And
well, I think,
they're just as bad.
But what you're seeing there, of course, is Dave brought up, the Black community, the African American community in the United States, and the main issue there, of course, is a plague of fatherlessness, that these children do not have fathers. And when you actually look at that and you say, well, okay, well, let's ignore color and we'll just look at families that are growing up without a father, children growing out of their father, you then at that point see, okay, it's the same level of criminality engaged in at this point. There's nothing uniquely terrible about African Americans. What it is that it's a question of, if you are a fatherless son, you tend more towards criminality than someone who doesn't. It's very difficult for you to escape that in many cases, and this is the main problem. This is why, of course, you see initiatives such as they have these various charities and various organizations who have men come in to act as fathers for people, to actually help in that sort of thing. And that can have a positive and salutary effect.
This is like the anti-clericalism too. Think about it. Like, when things are wrong in the church, and this shows that part of the history of the church has not been this notion of clericalism where everything is top down, but rather the church is built from the bottom up, and then it gets nourished top down from presbyters who give us the sacraments, and bishops that give obviously certain sacraments.
But the fruit can't be up there unless the roots are down here.
Exactly. So we're looking at the onus being placed on the laity, and it shows just how important the vocation of the layman is in the world today, and that should fill us with a little bit of, it shows the importance of our mission. We should understand the gravity of the mission that's placed at our feet right now as members of the laity, and that what we do or don't do will redound to our eternal benefit or dismay.
The dovetail on that, in Vatican II, a lot of people are, Vatican II, because you hate what you heard about it. No, like Sheen says, no one hates the Catholic Church. You hate what you've been told about the Catholic Church. The same thing with Vatican II. There was I believe, an understanding of this that was trying to come out, and how it actually worked itself out was completely different. Talking about the royal priesthood, that father of the home, the patriarch, is to be priest, prophet, and king in his home. Not a dictator by any means, but a priest, meaning he prays for his family, he sacrifices for his family. He's got that solar array up, just gathering, the rays of the sun by his prayers and his in holiness. And then prophet, teaching his family, reading the Bible to them at Bible age type reading and saints readings and stuff, and having the home, make sure that the home is got lots of images of the saints and they understand. And then his example in the home is always one that's teaching. Okay, and then priest, prophet, and king. King is this guide, this advisor, guide, ruler, but not in the sense of domineering, but being able to talk with your son or daughter about everything that needs to be discussed, all the different problems, and having a pattern of doing that throughout all their ages so that they do turn to you as their first counselor, as their advisor, as someone that they say, you know what, Dad said this, it must be true. And I got just one last thing before I turn it back over to Dave, is I got a great compliment from my son the other day. I told him no about something or other, and he actually said, you know what, I am lucky to have a dad who will tell me no for the right reasons. And I was just like, wow. He's 6 now. He'll probably lose that by the time he's 16. But that is really, I thought that was a great quote. Yeah, that's the type of ruler you want to be.
Quite different than that.
You want to be that. Where you tell them no, there's a kingship there. But they understand that it's a benevolent kingship.
Well, I would actually draw on, and firstly, I would say that obviously this is applying to people of both sexes, to men and women, and of course to children as well. That you're baptized as priest, prophet, and king, and obviously to express certainly priest is you're looking at this sense of you're sacrificing. Prophet is you're teaching the truth. King is about mastery, and it's usually about a sense of self-mastery. First and foremost, it's about a sense of self-mastery, about you're managing yourself, having temperance and the virtues, which I think that is the cornerstone of all the virtues, to be able to master these things so that you can go out and be holy.
St. John Eudes saw all this, the necessary aspect there of the laity, when he was setting the congregation for the street people, the poor, impoverished women, who would grow up to be the matriarch of the home, the queen of the home, as well. And also when the boys in the homes weren't exactly formed as well, and they're finding their way in the seminary, that he would establish seminaries to give them that fatherly guidance there that they hadn't got it earlier in life, to make sure that they're well formed and completely formed going on into the priesthood, because how necessary that formation was before they're ordained, that to get that formation in. And so he did all those things. And another thing that he really, his main devotion was the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And I want to give him a shout out, the fact that he did this, he was doing this before the revelations of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque. Before she got her revelations, John Eudes was already out there laying the groundwork for that devotion. And it reminds me of a quote from G.K. Chesterton. Now, he said, let your religion be less of a theory and more of a love affair. And if that doesn't explain the Sacred Heart devotion and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, that they are two real people. The new Adam, the new Eve didn't waffle on us and were always there for us, and continually are now, that personal relation, not a syrupy thing, this love is so equivocal, in meaning that it means meaningless in that word in the English language now, but an affair of the heart to heart, and having that personal relationship with Jesus and Mary continually is what he was about establishing. He composed a Mass to the Sacred Heart and the Holy Heart of Mary in 1668. And remember, Margaret Mary Alacoque's her revelation didn't come till 1673. So composing a Mass means the readings, the Psalms, chant melody and stuff like that, setting that up. Mass formulary. So it was also the first liturgy honoring the Immaculate Heart of Mary.
Right, did you say shout out though in the theological context? Because let's say like the bolt, the lightning comes.
I believe he is tuning in to the download today.
We call that reverencing the saints. Brad calls it shout. I want to give a shout out to my man upstairs.
Absolutely,
you're praying to
John,
God.
Praying to God.
I'm with you.
Oh dear, but I think it's worth actually discussing this, because the idea of the devotion to the hearts. So first off, and a very important thing you said, Brad, they're two real people. I think it's very important that we grasp that when we talk about referencing and venerating and giving devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, we're not merely speaking in some sort of symbolic sense. We are actually saying there, firstly, that obviously Jesus Christ's body, a real, physical, fully human body, each individual part of that is worthy of devotion. So that's why we have things like devotion to the sacred head, why we have devotion to the individual wounds of the passion, why we have all these various different kinds of devotions, devotion to the holy face and so forth. And when we talk about the devotion to the Sacred Heart, yes, we're talking about sort of a symbolic devotion of the heart as the seat of emotion and love and compassion and so forth, but we're also saying that we have this devotion to the physical organ in the chest of Jesus of Nazareth that pumped the blood around his body for 33 years and which died on the cross and which failed to pump blood because of the trauma that he inflicted on the cross. And we're talking as well about the Immaculate Heart of Mary, the heart that for 9 months pumped blood through Jesus's body in her womb. So we're talking about this in a very real sense. I think that's an important point when you're looking at St. John Eudes talking about these devotions here within the 17th century. This was, let's not forget, only a few short decades, 100 years or so after the Protestant revolt. It was still going on with its de-emphasizing of the physicality of the religion, the de-emphasizing of this, the rejection of the sacraments, this almost sort of Gnostic adoption there. And one of the heresies of the time was a heresy called Jansenism. Now, Jansenism, it's a little complicated to go into in a show, this sort of show, but ultimately what Jansenism is it's a series of theological errors related to salvation and the way grace operates in the soul. What happens is that people will say, oh, he's a real Jansenist, not meaning it necessarily specifically, but it indicates kind of what kind of thing Jansenism is. It's very cold, it's very aloof, it's very detached. It's exterior thing, it's intellectual, it's not a love affair. And so this promotion of devotion to the Sacred Heart and to the Immaculate Heart as these seats of emotion, of love, of compassion, of all of these kind of things, the seat of emotions. What this was in many ways an answer to Jansenism. Now, whether or not St. John Eudes consciously thought that this was a great devotion that would answer Jansenism, or if this is just an example of God saying, well, in response to this error here, I'm going to raise up this devotion there. And this is absolutely wonderful. And when you see these images of the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, what you will see is sometimes, of course, the depiction of the heart is very symbolic. It's just sort of like that little, do my Taylor Swift thing, cardiac shape there, as it's called in mathematics. Or sometimes it will be a very, almost medically accurate depiction. It looks like an anatomy textbook.
Four-chambered pump.
Yeah, four-chambered pump there with all of the various parts on it. But what you will see often is you will see it's surrounded by a corona of flame, showing the burning love that the hearts have for us, and sometimes as well it's shown encircled by thorns or something like that, showing the sufferings and the pain that they went through. So these are great devotions that we can do to fight against, maybe not specifically Jansenism, again, a bit complicated, but to fight against that intellectualizing of the faith.
And I think that problem that he encountered at that time was the laity. It's always about growing cold in the faith. And if there was one thing that was going on prior to Vatican II, well, many things, but one of the things was this religious formalism. The idea that pray, and obey, get your prayers in, avoid mortal sin, racing through your prayers without much religion, interiority, and that type of thing. And priests, even at the Latin Mass and that, they'd use a low Mass of the Mass for the burial, the particular, why can't I think of the Mass right now? Anyway, at the one for the burying of people, you actually, there was a modified Requiem Mass that you could just race right through it. And they were racing through it, and the altar boy couldn't even keep up with the prayers. They're just rattling through their prayers. He's trying to rattle and kept along, and everything is just rattling through. It's not like an auctioneer going through the thing. So the idea that we needed to get away from that. Well, you know what? Even that type of evil has been punished in the sense that you get this vaudeville show that's syrupy. And I'm not talking about a reverent Novus Ordo that's ad orientem, that's said by a priest who believes in the faith and this type of thing. But I'm talking about clown masses. We're talking about liturgical dancing. We're, LA Rec. Go to the LA Rec on our site, and you're going to see a wreck of a liturgy going on there. You know, all this syrupy stuff and all that type of thing is a response to this religious formalism, exactly the same way that you get the faith alone, blind faith of Martin Luther. You know, he thought philosophy was stupid, and so it's just faith alone. And then this Enlightenment era, where no, it's just reason alone. And then you go into the Romantic era, which is no, you got to follow your heart, you know. And so, the whole thing with Catholicism is not an either or; it's a both and. So, you know, the pendulum swings and that type of thing. But when you get this punishment, this bad rulers and that type of thing, you get bad liturgy and that type of thing, you get bad civil, what's going on today. Only then do you start to see the error of your ways. So we have to think of God not as someone that's punishing us, but actually giving us the medicine, letting nature take its course, but in this massive wisdom of it all, when nature does take its course, even with the demonic. I mean, if you talk to good exorcists, they're going to say, well, the devil's there to actually help you grow in sanctity.
Well, it's traditionally how it's worked, too. The faith has grown through punctuated equilibrium vis-a-vis these ecumenical councils, which arise generally, not always, as you saw with like Lateran IV and whatnot, and Vatican II less so. They arise, though, generally in response to some heresy or some exigency that has raised itself in the church. And such is the goodness and providence of God that he is able to, through the errors of people like Arius and Nestorius and Martin Luther, actually broaden and deepen our understanding of the true deposit of faith and carry forth the kind of evolution. Obviously, the seed has always been there. The deposit of faith doesn't change. It's always been there in more inchoate form. But to carry on the evolution of the deposit of faith and its unpacking and its parsing out through a series of crises. So that's always how it's been. It's a very Catholic way. I mean, think about all of the first 7 councils. They come to us through Christological heresies that were unfortunately imbibed by a lot of members of the faithful.
Well, that's the thing, though. We have to remember that just because the guy's a martyr and is saint and everything else, the guy that did the murdering is not having a good day. And the people that bring these heresies, you know, Jesus said, you know, it's necessary that scandal come. Scandal that tries us, that tests us, that brings us, it's necessary to come. But woe to him by whom it comes. So I wouldn't be out there just starting any heresies and, you know, fires and stuff like that in order just to say, you know, this is all going to bring forth clarity and all that. That's a scary situation.
Well,
so
that's why I have Brad on the download. He speaks the heresy so that, you know, Simon and I can can clarify it.
You're the guy talking evolution and punctuate equilibrium, man. I'm like, whoa, what?
And
Well,
using
Pius
my
XII
cousin
says you can believe
Vinny
that.
as the foundation.
I'm definitely doing finger guns on
Where's
the
that
way
big
out.
hook that comes from the side and just gives him a yank, you know? Anyway, thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of The Download. An important announcement before we go to prayer. 2 of our new shows, Hardline and Membership Monday, are on hiatus as we add resources to other programming and shift manpower around to other aspects of our work. Again, to emphasize, Hardline and Membership Monday are currently on hiatus, meaning no new episodes currently rolling out on those 2 shows in the near future. Church Militant is adding resources to new programming that will help you level up your faith life, as we see much needed. And now please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and our church. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve.
A te clamamus exules filii Eve, a te suspiramus gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ergo advocata nostra, ilos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende, o clemens o pia, o dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you again for joining us for The Download. We premiere a new episode like this every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.